They told me I was dead. My own family mourned, held memorials, and buried my name while I was still alive. My son and his wife drained my fortune, sold my husband's foundation, and pretended I'd never existed. But when I walked back into my own house, I saw the fear on their faces, and the truth froze them in their tracks. Before I continue, subscribe for more stories of love, betrayal, and karma, just like this one. When I opened the door to my own mansion, the laughter inside stopped. My daughter-in-law's wine glass slipped from her hand. My son turned pale as if he'd seen a ghost, and maybe, in a way, he had. The lights above the marble foyer hummed faintly. The air smelled of roses and expensive candles. I hadn't smelled either of those things since the crash. For 6 months, everyone believed I was dead, lost in a private plane accident somewhere over the Pacific. The world moved on. My memorial was streamed online, my ashes were replaced with ocean water, and my $25 million estate was quietly divided. But I was alive, bruised, burned, and more awake than I'd ever been. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, Ellie to the few who ever used it kindly. I was 63 when the plane went down. My husband, Thomas, had died a year earlier, leaving behind his tech empire and a fortune he'd built from the ground up. I thought our legacy would bring the family together. Instead, it was the spark that set them all on fire. I remember the morning of the crash with terrifying clarity. The pilot, a young man named Jared, joked that I should start drinking Mai Tais before we even left the runway. The weather was clean, the sea below glittered like glass, and then silence. A mechanical scream. Gravity snatched the plane by the throat and threw us down. I woke up in a mangled mess of metal and seawater, with Jared gone and only a half-submerged seat to cling to. A fishing crew found me 2 days later. They took me to a remote island clinic with no internet, no headlines, and no memories except pain. When I finally reached civilization again, the news had already buried me. Eleanor Whitmore confirmed dead in crash. Family mourns Tech Harris. I stared at my own obituary numb. There was a strange relief in it. The chance to see what the world would do without me. I should have called my children immediately. But curiosity is a dangerous hunger. I wanted to see how they would live now that I was gone. My lawyer, David Ross, had been Thomas's best friend before he became mine. When he finally answered my call, the shock in his voice turned to hesitation. Ellie, they've already executed the preliminary will. You might want to see something before you decide what to do. He sent me the recording of my memorial. My son Michael stood at the podium, perfect in his dark suit, voice steady. He spoke about duty, family, and legacy. His wife Claire wept in slow, practiced rhythm beside him. And my daughter, Anna, sweet, messy Anna, wasn't even there later. I found out she'd been asked not to come because the press might twist her grief into a scene. That night, I stayed in a small hotel under a false name. I watched as news broke that the Whitmore mansion had been temporarily transferred to Michael for estate management. Within a week, Claire's fashion brand launched a new line called the Widow Collection, dedicated to the memory of a remarkable woman. My face was on the campaign's homepage. It was surreal, watching my family build a future on my grave. I told David not to reveal that I was alive. Not yet, I said. Let's see what happens. He warned me that secrecy might destroy whatever trust was left. But I needed to know the truth, and truth rarely survives politeness. From a small apartment downtown, I started following every move they made. The papers called Michael the steady hand of the Whitmore legacy. The interviews showed him smiling beside Claire, both of them photographed in front of my house. The mansion looked smaller on screen, somehow more hollow. Anna, meanwhile, had vanished from public view. I found a local article about her volunteering at a community art center. She'd been offered a modest inheritance, which she declined, saying she wanted nothing from money that cost her mother her peace. Reading that line broke something in me I didn't know could still break. Weeks turned to months. I healed, slowly, physically and otherwise. I dyed my hair, changed my walk, practiced being invisible. Sometimes I'd sit across the street from my old life and watch the lights flicker on inside the windows. My garden was gone, replaced with a pool. Claire had thrown out my late husband's piano. I heard her laugh echoing through the open doors one afternoon, and something inside me decided they needed to see me again. But not yet as Eleanor Whitmore. Not as the woman they'd buried. I wanted to know who they were when no one was watching. Through David, I arranged to meet with some of the board members of Thomas's company, pretending to be an investor interested in philanthropic partnerships. It was remarkable how easily I slipped into another skin. The name on my card was Ellen Ward. No one looked twice. Money opens doors faster than blood ever will. At one meeting, Michael arrived late. His tone was brisk, his handshake impatient. He didn't recognize me, though he said I reminded him of someone. My mother used to look at me like that. He muttered, half to himself, before flipping through the portfolio. For a moment, guilt flickered in his eyes, but it was gone before I could name it. When I asked about the family foundation, my husband's life's work, he shrugged. We liquidated most of it. Low ROI. Better to invest in real estate. I kept my voice steady. And the community programs it funded. He smiled. We're handling that privately now. Later, I checked. Every account had been drained within weeks of my supposed death. Some of the money had gone to new cars, trips, and Claire's business expansion. The rest sat quietly in shell companies. My son, the boy who once cried when he broke a window because Dad worked hard for that, had become a stranger. The worst part wasn't their greed. It was their comfort. They seemed genuinely at peace with my absence, as if my death had simplified their lives. One evening, David called. Ellie, he said quietly. Claire's throwing an anniversary party next month. At your mansion. A party. In the house where my husband and I built our entire life. I felt something ancient stir inside me. Rage, maybe, or justice trying to find its way back through the smoke. I'm coming home, I told him. The day of the party, I wore a navy dress Thomas had once chosen for me, one I found still folded in the back of a storage locker. My hair had grown silver at the edges, and the scar on my cheek was faint but visible. I didn't hide either. The guards at the gate didn't recognize me. I said I was a guest from the board. Inside, chandeliers glimmered over polished marble. Lauder spilled from the great room, full of people who toasted to my son's remarkable resilience. The music stopped when I stepped through the doorway. Michael's hand froze around his glass. Claire's smile collapsed. She whispered something I couldn't hear, and her knees nearly gave way. I said. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of all the words I'd held back for months. I hope I'm not late. No one spoke. The silence felt like thunder held between breaths. Claire was the first to find her voice. This isn't possible. Michael took a step forward. Mom, his face drained of color. Mom, you can't be dead? I finished for him. That's what they told me too. I watched the room shift. Whispers rippled through the guests. Funds lifted discreetly. I caught sight of David in the back corner, his eyes full of a sadness I didn't have the strength to name. I suppose, I said softly, you're wondering how I survived. No one answered. They didn't care how. They only cared why. Why I had returned. Why the lie of my death was about to unravel the life they'd built. I walked to the piano, the one Claire had ordered removed but apparently couldn't sell. I ran my fingers across the dusted keys. Thomas bought this for me on our first anniversary, said he wanted the house to have music in every corner. Claire swallowed hard. Eleanor, we thought you were gone. The authorities. The authorities were wrong. I turned to face her. But you didn't question it, did you? Michael stepped between us. Mom, please. It wasn't like that. We were grieving. I met his eyes. You were cashing checks before the memorial ended. He flinched. That's not fair. Fair. The word burned on my tongue. Fair is what I taught you when you were 6 and broke your sister's toy. Fair is what I practiced every time I chose to believe the best of you. Fair, I said, my voice breaking, is what you forgot the moment I wasn't here to remind you who you were. Claire tried to speak, but her voice cracked. I could almost pity her. Almost. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring, some embarrassed, others fascinated. Only family and a few close associates remained. David approached quietly and placed a folder on the piano. I brought what you asked for, he whispered. Inside were copies of transactions, forged signatures, and emails. Proof of how deep the betrayal ran. I didn't need to read them aloud. Michael saw the papers and looked at the floor. I don't want your money, I said. I just wanted to see who I raised. The room fell utterly still. The chandelier hummed. Claire reached for Michael's arm, but he pulled away. For a long time, none of us spoke. Then Anna appeared in the doorway. She'd heard the commotion and driven across town. When she saw me, she stopped dead. Mom, that single word, the tremor in it, was the first honest sound in the house all evening. I crossed the room, and she ran into my arms. Her hug was real, trembling, human. They said you were gone, she sobbed. I whispered back. But not anymore. Over her shoulder, I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, frozen in their own kind of silence. This was the beginning, not the end. I had returned to find the truth, and the truth was uglier than I ever imagined. But the night was young, and the reckoning had only just begun. Anna wouldn't let go of me. Her tears soaked into my shoulder as if she was trying to prove I was real by drowning me in the evidence. I could feel her heart beat against mine, frantic, uneven, alive. It was a sound I hadn't heard in months. It reminded me what love was supposed to feel like, messy, uncontrollable, and true, but across the room, love had frozen into something else. Michael stood stiff, hands in his pockets, pretending to breathe normally. Claire, meanwhile, hovered beside him, her perfectly glossed lips parted in disbelief. The crowd had dispersed. Only a handful of witnesses remained, most of them too stunned to move. Anna, I whispered, brushing her hair away from her face. It's okay, sweetheart, I'm here now. She looked up, eyes red. How? They said. There was a plane crash. They said there was no chance you survived. There wasn't, I said softly. But somehow I did. And maybe it's better that I saw things the way I did, before coming home. Michael finally found his voice. You were watching us? Yes, I said. Long enough to see what grief looks like when no one's pretending. He flinched again, and I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He wasn't processing my survival as a miracle. He was processing it as a problem. Claire, on the other hand, was already performing again. A liner? This is incredible. You're my god! She moved toward me, arms half open, but her eyes were searching, darting toward David, toward the folder still on the piano. I didn't step forward. Save your performance, Claire. I've seen the reruns. She froze mid-step, her painted smile faltering. I don't understand what you mean. I think you do. David said from behind her, voice calm but firm. We have a lot to discuss. Privately, no, I said sharply. Not privately, not this time. The word privately had been my mistake for most of my life. I had handled everything behind closed doors. The arguments, the apologies, the disappointments. Privacy had protected my family's image but strangled the truth. Not anymore. Michael tried to take control. Mom, listen, it's been months. We were told the will had to be executed. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, I said. Because knowing would have made it harder to do what you did next. His mouth tightened. We were grieving. Then why did you sell your father's foundation 3 weeks after my memorial? He didn't answer. Claire stepped in. Moo needed liquidity for estate taxes. Eleanor, you have no idea what it cost to manage a property like this. We did what was necessary. Necessary? I repeated. Was it also necessary to liquidate the Women's Shelter Fund? The one Thomas named after my mother. Her face went pale. That account was barely being used. It was being used by women who had nowhere else to go. I snapped, the room echoing with my voice. You replaced them with a pool. Claire's jaw trembled. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But then she did what she always did when caught. She straightened her spine, painted over her guilt with a perfect mask, and said, It's easy to judge when you weren't here. Anna stepped forward before I could answer. She wasn't here because she almost died, Claire. You were here because you couldn't wait to replace her. Watch your tone, Claire hissed. Anna laughed bitterly. What tone? The one you used when you called me a parasite after the funeral. Michael spun toward her. That's not true. Oh, it's very true, Anna said, glaring at both of them. You told me to stop making Mom's death about myself. You said I should be grateful you even let me attend. Michael's voice cracked. You don't understand what it was like. Anna, the pressure. The pressure of what? I interrupted. Being rich enough to forget you had a conscience. The silence that followed was suffocating. David cleared his throat gently. Perhaps we should all take a breath. Mrs. Whitmore, I think your intention tonight was to observe. My intention, I said, cutting him off, was to see who I could still call family. I think I've seen enough. I turned to leave, but Anna grabbed my arm. Mom, please. Don't go. You just got back. I looked at her, the one child who had mourned me honestly. Her eyes were raw, pleading. I'm not going anywhere, I said. But I can't stay here tonight. Not in this house. David nodded, already understanding. I'll drive you. As we walked out, I didn't look back at Michael or Claire. I didn't have to. The sound behind me, the faint clatter of a glass, the sharp inhale of panic, told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, I woke in a quiet hotel suite overlooking the city. David sat by the window, typing on his laptop. He'd been awake all night. They'll try to cover it up, he said without turning. Michael's already called the press, claiming you reappeared unexpectedly after months of private recovery. They're spinning it like a miracle story. I poured coffee from the room service tray. Let them spin. They've always been good at pretending, David sighed. Ellie, you could press charges. The forged documents, the misappropriation of funds. It's enough to start a criminal case. I stared into my cup. And what then? My son in handcuffs. My grandchildren in headlines. I didn't come back for revenge. He closed his laptop. Then what did you come back for? The question sat heavy between us. I came back, I said slowly, to see if there's anything left worth saving. Later that day, I returned to the mansion, not as a ghost this time, but as the owner I'd always been. The staff looked at me with wide eyes, unsure whether to curtsy or cross themselves. Most of them had been fired or replaced in my absence. The few who remained whispered as I passed. I went straight to my study. It was almost unrecognizable, the walls stripped of Thomas's photographs, the shelves now filled with luxury decor books instead of journals. The only thing untouched was the old globe he used to spin while making investment plans. I ran my fingers over it. The world kept turning, even when you stopped existing. A soft knock came at the door. It was Michael. He looked older than 6 months should have made him. His tie was gone, his eyes sunken. "Mom," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Go ahead." He sat but didn't meet my gaze. "I don't know where to start." "Try the truth," I said. He nodded slowly. "I made mistakes. I didn't handle things the way I should have. But it wasn't greed, I swear. It was pressure. Claire wanted to move fast. She said if we didn't act, the taxes and lawyers would eat everything. He exhaled shakily. I just wanted to hold it together. I studied him. He was my son, the same boy who once hid behind my leg on the first day of school, terrified of the world. Somewhere between then and now, that boy had learned to lie like a man. "Michael," I said softly. "You could have called David before touching a cent. You could have called me. You didn't even ask for confirmation that I was gone." His head dropped. "When the wreckage was found, they said there were no survivors." "The bodies were?" He stopped. "I thought I was burying you, and after you buried me," I said, "you started spending me." He winced but didn't deny it. I leaned forward. "You sold your father's foundation, Michael. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." He looked up, eyes wet now. "I was angry, Mom. You left everything to a family name, not to people. It felt like I was just another trustee, not your son." That hit deeper than I expected. For a moment, I saw him as he saw himself, a shadow of a legacy, living in a house built on someone else's success. Maybe part of his greed was resentment. But resentment doesn't excuse cruelty. "I built that foundation so you and Anna could have something meaningful to carry forward," I said. "Not a brand, not a portfolio. Something that mattered." He rubbed his temples. "Claire said no one cared about charity anymore. She said Dad's image was old-fashioned. Claire said a lot of things." I murmured. "And you believed them because it was easier than disagreeing." He didn't answer. "Where is she?" I asked finally. "At the gallery," he said. "She's avoiding you." "Good," I said. "Let her avoid me. I want her to think about what comes next." Michael stood, uncertain. "What does come next?" I looked at him long and hard. "That depends on whether you want to be my son again, or just another business partner waiting for the next will." He didn't reply. He just nodded and left. That evening, I found Anna sitting by the fountain in the garden, the only part of the property that still looked remotely like home. The water shimmered in the fading light, reflecting her face, softer than I remembered, but stronger too. "Do you believe him?" she asked quietly as I sat beside her. "I believe he's scared," I said, "and maybe that's a start." She stared into the water. "You should have told me you were alive." "I wanted to," I admitted. "But I needed to see who you all were without me. I didn't expect to find this." Anna smiled sadly. "I knew something was off after the funeral. They made everything about optics. The guest list, the flowers, even the eulogies. Claire told me to wear black, but nothing too emotional. I think that's when I stopped coming around." I took her hand. "You were the only one who mourned me for real." She squeezed back. "I didn't mourn the money, Mom. I mourned you." For a moment, the silence between us felt healing. Then she said softly, "What are you going to do with them?" "I haven't decided," I said. "But I know this, I won't let greed inherit what love built." That night, I asked David to meet me again. We sat across from each other in his office, the city lights flickering through the blinds. "I want a full audit," I said. "Every account, every transfer since the day of my death. I want to know who touched what and why." He nodded. "Already in progress." "But Ellie, this will open a lot of wounds." "They're already open," I said. "I'm just cleaning them." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else you should see." He slid a manila envelope across the desk. Inside were photographs, surveillance stills, timestamps. One showed Claire meeting with a man I didn't recognize at a private restaurant. Another showed them holding hands as they left. The caption underneath read, "Ronan Graves, Michael's financial consultant." I looked up. "Are you telling me?" David sighed. "I'm telling you she's been siphoning money into accounts linked to him, and based on these, I'd say their relationship isn't purely professional." The room tilted for a second. I wasn't surprised. Not really. But the confirmation turned my stomach. "She's clever," David continued. "Used your son as a cover, then moved the funds through his approval. If we expose her, then we expose them both," I said coldly. David studied me. "You said you didn't want revenge." "I don't," I said, "but I want accountability." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll do it carefully, legally, and publicly." As I left his office, the night air hit me like truth itself. Sharp, cleansing, and cruel. I thought about the house I'd built, The family I'd raised, the love I'd trusted to hold us together. And I realized something I hadn't before. Death hadn't broken my family. Money had. And now it was time to see just how far they'd go to keep it. That week, I received an invitation. A hand-delivered envelope, sealed in gold. Inside was a card written in Claire's elegant handwriting, "Family dinner, Saturday 7 p.m. Let's start over." I stared at it for a long time. Start over? The irony nearly made me laugh. I placed it on the table, next to the folder David had given me, and whispered to the empty room, "Let's." Because starting over, this time, wouldn't mean forgiveness. It would mean revelation. And when the truth came out, I wanted them all at the same table to hear it. The rain came that Saturday evening like it had been waiting for a cue. Thick, silver sheets of it blurred the city skyline, and the sound against the car roof was like static. Relentless, cleansing, almost holy. I sat in the back seat of David's sedan, staring at the mansion gates ahead. They were open wide, waiting. "Last chance to turn around," David said softly. "I've already done that once," I replied. "Not again," he nodded. "Everything's ready. The auditors are standing by. Your lawyer's statement will go live the moment you say the word." I looked at him. The man who'd been loyal to our family long after the family stopped deserving it. "Thank you, David, for staying," he smiled faintly. "You're not the kind of woman people forget how to stand beside." I didn't answer. I pushed the door open and stepped into the rain. The mansion was glowing from the inside, golden, warm, deceitful. Through the wide windows I could see silhouettes moving about, Claire pouring wine, Michael pacing, Anna seated quietly in the corner. It almost looked like peace if peace didn't tremble so much. As I entered, the scent of rosemary and roasted meat hit me. Claire always used food as a prop. Every meal a performance, every table a stage. She looked up from her chair when she saw me, her face perfectly composed. "Eleanor," she said smoothly, as though this was just another dinner. "You came." "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." Michael rose, trying to smile. "Mom, we just wanted to talk. No lawyers, no tension. Just family." The word sounded foreign coming from him. Anna gave me a small nod. "I'm glad you came." I sat down opposite Claire. "Well," I said, folding my napkin, "let's talk." Dinner began quietly. The clinking of silverware was too polite, too careful. Claire asked about my health. I told her it was better than ever. Michael asked about the island. I told him survival was simpler than wealth. Anna barely touched her food. Finally, Claire leaned forward. "Eleanor, I know there's been misunderstanding. We've all acted out of fear. But I truly believe we can start again. The company, the family, the foundation, we can rebuild everything together." Together, I repeated, my tone dry. "That's an interesting word, considering how alone I was while you rebuilt everything without me." She laughed softly. "You know how the media works. We had to keep things moving, or the empire would crumble." "And how's the empire now?" I asked. Her smile flickered. "Stable, thriving actually. I made some smart investments." "Yes," I said. "Ronan Graves must be proud." The fork slipped from her hand. The sound was tiny, metallic, but it hit the table like a confession. Michael looked confused. "Ronan, my financial advisor. What does he have to do with?" "Everything," I said, my gaze locked on Claire. "Tell him, dear." Claire forced a laugh. "I have no idea what you're implying." "Then I'll help you remember." I pulled a small envelope from my bag and placed it beside her plate. She didn't touch it. I opened it myself, sliding the photographs across the linen. The black and white images of her and Ronan holding hands in that restaurant looked stark under the chandelier light. Michael's eyes widened. "What is this?" "Your wife's business meetings," I said calmly. They were quite productive, emotionally and financially. "Michael," Claire said quickly, her voice trembling. "This isn't what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. "She and Ronan funneled money from your accounts into offshore holdings. About $4 million last I checked." Michael stood abruptly. "You're lying." "Am I?" I slid another document forward. David's audit report. Signatures, dates, wire receipts. "Your name's on some of them, but the transactions don't match your authorization pattern." "Do you know why?" He didn't, not yet, but I could see the moment he started to believe he might. "Claire," I said, "you forged his approval, didn't you?" She looked at me with venom. "You're insane. You came back from the dead to ruin us." "No," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." Anna stood suddenly. "Mom, maybe we should stop." "No, Anna," I said. "This has to end. Lies end when the truth finally speaks louder." Michael stared at the papers, his face pale. "Claire, tell me this isn't true." Her silence was her answer. I could see the collapse beginning. The unraveling of years of control. Claire's shoulders stiffened. Her eyes darted toward the door, toward escape. "You can't prove any of this in court," she said. "And even if you could, you'd destroy your own family's name." I'm not here to destroy it, I said. I'm here to reclaim it. At that moment the lights flickered. A gust of wind from the storm rattled the windows. The house seemed to shiver, or maybe that was just us. Michael sank back into his chair, the fight gone. You knew, he said to Claire, voice hollow. You knew I trusted you. I did it for us, she said. No, he whispered. You did it for you. I stood. Michael, you're going to sign over every remaining asset you transferred under false pretense. The company, the properties, all of it. And you're going to cooperate with the audit. David will handle the legalities. He looked up. And if I don't? Then I release everything to the press. Claire's face twisted. You wouldn't dare? Try me, I said. The storm outside roared as if answering for me. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Michael nodded slowly. I'll sign. I'll fix it. I just want this nightmare to end. I met his eyes. It's not a nightmare, Michael. It's a mirror. Claire stood abruptly. You think this is justice? You think humiliating us in our own home makes you righteous? No, I said. I think it makes me free. She took a step closer, her voice dropping. You don't know what you've started, Eleanor. You think money's the only thing people can take. Wait until you lose your family for real. I stared at her, unflinching. I already did. After dinner, the storm eased into a whisper. Michael signed the preliminary documents under David's supervision. Claire disappeared upstairs, slamming the door. Anna stayed beside me, silent, her hand steady on mine. When it was done, I walked out onto the veranda. The garden lights glowed faintly through the mist. The world smelled of wet soil and endings. Michael joined me after a while. I didn't know about the affair, he said. I swear I didn't. I believe you, I said. But you knew something was wrong, and you ignored it. He nodded. I thought loyalty meant pretending not to see. That's not loyalty, I said. That's fear. He exhaled shakily. What happens now? That depends on you, I said. You can help me rebuild the foundation, or you can walk away with what's left of your pride. He stared at the rain. And Claire, she'll face her own consequences, but not by your hand. He gave a small nod. I don't deserve forgiveness. No, I said softly, but you might earn it. He left without another word. I stayed there long after he was gone, listening to the soft rhythm of water dripping from the eaves. It sounded like time melting, one drop at a time. Later that night I heard footsteps. I turned to see Claire standing in the doorway, barefoot, mascara streaked. She was holding a small suitcase. Running away already, I asked. Her laugh was brittle. You think I'm staying here after that circus? Then go, I said, but leave what's not yours. She hesitated. You think you're some kind of saint, don't you? Coming back from the dead to play judge and jury. I think I'm someone who finally stopped mistaking silence for peace. Her voice cracked. You ruined me. No, Claire. You ruined yourself the moment you chose greed over grace. She looked like she wanted to hit me. Instead, she whispered, You'll die alone, Eleanor, just like before. I smiled faintly. Then at least I'll die honest. She turned and disappeared into the rain. The next morning the papers hit the newsstands before sunrise. Whitmore matriarch returns, exposes financial betrayal. It was everywhere, headlines, broadcasts, online threads. The story spread like wildfire, half truth and half myth. David called it dawn. You did it, he said simply. I didn't do it for applause, I said. I know, he replied. But the truth's out now. And for what it's worth, the foundation's name is already trending again. For the right reasons this time. I smiled faintly. Thomas would have liked that. Anna came into the room carrying 2 mugs of coffee. The world's losing its mind, she said. You've become some kind of symbol. Everyone's calling you the woman who came back. Let them, I said. They can have the legend. I just want my life. She sat beside me. Do you think Michael will ever forgive himself? I don't know, I said. Forgiveness isn't a gift. It's a debt people have to pay off. One honest act at a time, she nodded. And Claire, she won't get far, I said. Not from the truth. Anna looked at me carefully. Do you feel free? I thought about it. About the crash, the isolation, the months of watching my family live without me. I thought about the night I walked into my own house and saw their faces freeze in horror. Freedom, I said finally, isn't being alive. It's being able to live without lies. That evening, I walked through the empty halls of the mansion. The laughter was gone. The ghosts, though, were still there, not haunting me, but waiting for acknowledgement. I stopped in the music room, where the piano still stood. My fingers touched the keys, and a single note echoed. Thomas's favorite song. I began to play, hesitantly at first, then with more strength. The melody filled the house, soft but unbroken, and I realized something for the first time in years. I wasn't performing for anyone. I was remembering. When the final note faded, I whispered into the still air, "It's over, love." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Not yet. There were still papers to sign, restitutions to make, truths to tell. The foundation could rise again, not as a monument to wealth, but as proof that even the dead can come back to rebuild the living. As I turned off the light, I caught my reflection in the window. Older, yes, but stronger. The kind of woman who had walked through fire and found her own shadow waiting on the other side. The storm outside had cleared. The night was calm again, but the story wasn't done. Tomorrow, I would write my final will, and this time, it wouldn't be about what they inherited. It would be about what they deserved. And for once, that would finally be the same thing. The courtroom smelled of cold marble and tension. Reporters packed every seat, their cameras flashing like lightning under the ceiling lamps. My name was on every headline now, a ghost-turned witness, the woman who rose from the grave to reclaim her stolen life. I sat in the front row beside David, hands folded, calm on the outside but trembling inside. Claire sat at the defense table, pristine in her ivory suit, her hair tied back in that polished perfection she always used to wear at charity galas. Her eyes flicked to mine once, a tiny smirk twisting her lips, but it wasn't confidence. It was survival instinct. She knew she was cornered, and predators get quiet when they're cornered. Michael entered minutes later. He looked thinner, older, hollow. He didn't sit beside Claire. He sat behind her, arms folded, expression blank. When he caught my gaze, he didn't look away this time. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The first hour was procedural, verifying documents, hearing motions. But under that calm veneer, everyone knew the storm was about to break. The audit David conducted had uncovered a trail so intricate even I hadn't realized how deep it went. Ronan Graves, Claire's advisor, had siphoned millions not only from my inheritance, but from charitable trusts tied to the foundation my late husband built. Claire had approved it, forged it, and in some cases initiated it. When the prosecutor stood, the quiet turned sharp. "Mrs. Claire Whitmore, you are charged with fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of funds exceeding $25 million. How do you plead?" Her voice didn't tremble. Not guilty. Of course she wasn't. I was called next. Walking to that witness stand felt like walking into the wreckage of my past. Every betrayal, every silence, every moment I told myself to stay dignified. But there was no dignity in denial anymore. Only truth. They swore me in. The prosecutor started softly, his tone almost kind. "Mrs. Whitmore, can you tell us, in your own words, what happened after the plane crash?" I nodded. "The world thought I died, but I survived. I was stranded for weeks before I was found. When I recovered, I stayed hidden to see how my family would handle things without me. I needed to know who they really were when the money was all that was left." A murmur ran through the crowd. The prosecutor leaned in. "And what did you find?" "That my son tried to keep things afloat. That my daughter tried to hold the family together. And that my daughter-in-law," I looked directly at Claire, "used my supposed death as an opportunity to take control." The prosecutor nodded. "You have evidence of that?" I gestured toward David, who handed the judge a folder. "Financial records, emails, and surveillance footage. All verified." Claire's lawyer objected, saying it was emotional manipulation, but the judge allowed it. They played one of the recorded clips, Claire meeting Ronan Graves in a quiet restaurant, sliding an envelope across the table. Her voice was clear. "No one will know. By the time they figure it out, the money will be safe." The silence that followed was suffocating. Claire's lawyer stood. My client was under stress. Her husband was grieving, the company was in chaos. These meetings were about stabilizing family finances. The prosecutor turned. "Then why were the funds transferred to accounts under her maiden name in the Cayman Islands?" The lawyer hesitated. "My client." "Answer the question," the judge said sharply. Claire's lips parted, but no sound came out. I sat quietly, every breath slow and deliberate. I wasn't enjoying this. I wasn't here for vengeance. I was here to stop the rot that had nearly consumed everything my husband built. When my testimony ended, I returned to my seat. Anna reached for my hand. "You did good, Mom," she whispered. Michael was called next. His voice was rough, low. "I didn't know about the forged documents," he said. "I trusted her. I thought she was trying to protect what was left. I found out too late." The prosecutor asked, "Did you benefit financially from your mother's estate during the time she was presumed dead?" "Yes," he said. "But I didn't touch the main accounts. Claire handled all of that. I should have looked closer. I didn't. When they dismissed him, he passed by me. He paused just long enough to whisper, 'I'm sorry.' 'I know,' I said. 'Now fix it.'" Hours passed and the air grew heavy with fatigue and shame. By afternoon, it wasn't about money anymore. It was about morality, how greed corrodes love, how silence kills truth, how families die long before funerals ever happen. Finally, Claire took the stand. Her lawyer tried to control the direction, but she pushed back, answering questions with sharpness and poise. At first. Then came the recording David had found, the one from the night she thought she was alone in her study. Her voice was crisp, cold, confessing everything into her phone like a diary. I deserve it. I made this family what it is. If Eleanor hadn't hoarded power, I wouldn't have had to take it. When the audio stopped, Claire didn't look up. The prosecutor asked, "Do you deny that is your voice?" She didn't answer. "Do you deny that you transferred the funds?" Still silence. Finally she lifted her head. "I did what I had to. You all talk about morality, but what about survival? You think you'd survive in that house, next to her, always being compared to a dead woman?" I wasn't stealing. I was reclaiming what I was owed. The judge banged the gavel for order, but the courtroom was already alive with murmurs. Reporters scribbled furiously. I rose before I realized I was standing. "Claire," I said quietly, "I was never your enemy." She looked at me with pure resentment. "You were the ghost that haunted every inch of my life. And you chose to become me," I said. "But you only copied the power, not the purpose." Her mask cracked. "You think purpose feeds people? Power does?" "No," I said. "Love does, and that's something you never learned." The judge called for silence again. The rest of the trial blurred. Evidence piled up, objections rose and fell, words like fraud, forgery, embezzlement bounced around like bullets in a glass box. When the verdict finally came, it was inevitable, guilty on all counts. Claire's composure shattered when the sentence was read, 6 years. Reduced for cooperation if she returned the funds. She didn't look at me when they led her away. Only at Michael, whose eyes were filled with a grief too complicated to name. The courtroom emptied slowly. Reporters shouted questions. I ignored them. David stayed by my side, guiding me past the flashing lights. Outside, the air was bright and cold. No rain. Just sunlight. For the first time in what felt like years, we reached the steps where the press clustered like vultures. A woman pushed forward, microphone extended. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have any comment for the public?" I stopped, looked straight into the sea of lenses, and said, "Wealth can be rebuilt. Integrity can't. Don't measure people by what they inherit. Measure them by what they protect when no one's watching." That made the evening news. They said I spoke like a queen. But I wasn't a queen. I was a survivor of love turned into war. Later that evening, I sat alone in my study. The house was quiet again, eerily so. The trial was over, but the aftermath had only begun. There were letters from charities wanting to partner again, investors asking to restore the foundation, and messages from strangers thanking me for proving that family and fortune don't always mix. But all I could think about was what I'd lost in the process. Anna came in quietly. "You didn't eat," she said, setting down a tray. I lied. She sat across from me. "You did the right thing." "I did what I had to." "Same thing," she said softly. After a long silence, I asked, "Do you ever think we'll be a family again?" She looked at the fire for a while. "Maybe. But not the same kind. Not the one we were. Maybe that's okay." I nodded. "Maybe." The fire crackled, small embers floating upward like tiny pieces of the past finally burning out. I thought of Michael, broken, rebuilding, somewhere trying to reconcile the man he was with the man he could still be. I thought of Claire in that sterile cell, still convincing herself she was right. I even thought of Ronan, who fled the country before the verdict, leaving behind nothing but a paper trail and a curse. None of them mattered anymore. The only thing that did was this: I was alive. And this time, I wasn't living for anyone's approval. The night grew quiet around me. I could almost hear Thomas's voice again, calm and warm. "You were always the strongest of us," he would have said. Maybe I had been strong, or maybe I'd just been too stubborn to stay buried. Either way, I had come back, not for revenge, but for restoration. And now that the truth had spoken, I could finally start living in peace. At least, that's what I thought. But the next morning, a letter arrived, postmarked from an unknown sender. Inside was a single line, written in familiar, looping script. "You think it's over, Eleanor. You only exposed one of us." My hands trembled as I read it. The ink was still fresh. And just like that, I realized the storm wasn't done with me yet. The letter lay on my desk like a ghost breathing. I read the single line again and again. "You think it's over, Eleanor. You only exposed one of us." The handwriting was hauntingly familiar, elegant and deliberate, like someone who knew me well enough to mimic my rhythm. For a moment, my heart hammered not from fear, but from recognition. Whoever wrote this hadn't just known about the crimes. They had been part of them. I picked up my phone and called David. He answered on the second ring. "David," I said quietly, "someone sent me a letter." A pause. "Another journalist." "No. This one isn't asking questions. It's making a statement." When he arrived 30 minutes later, I was still staring at the paper. He picked it up carefully, scanning it. Postmarked locally, no return address. "Looks like they wanted you to know they're still here. Or that they were always here," I said. close enough to watch me. He studied my face. You think it's Michael? I shook my head. No, he's too straightforward. This is deliberate, cold. Someone who wants me to wonder, not accuse. David sighed. Well, trace it. But, Eleanor, you know this may not be the end of the secrets. Claire and Ronan weren't smart enough to pull off half the financial manipulation without help. I looked toward the window. The sky outside was gray again, restless, like it knew something was about to shift. Then it's time we found out who else had a hand in burying me. By afternoon, the house felt heavier than usual. I sat in Thomas's old study, the scent of cedar and paper still lingering after all these years. That room had always been his sanctuary. He used to say, truth doesn't hide, it waits. I had never understood it until now. The investigation began quietly. David reached out to a private forensics specialist, someone who could trace not just letters, but movements, bank transfers, property acquisitions, coded correspondences. The kind of digital shadows only the guilty leave behind. Meanwhile, I went through Thomas's old files. He had kept everything: letters from investors, correspondence with partners, even small notes written in the margins of business ledgers. And then I found it, a name, Gregory Hales. He had been Thomas's closest friend and legal counsel for decades. After Thomas's death, Gregory had helped manage the estate transition. He'd been the one to finalize the probate documents when the plane crash happened. And now, as I looked at the signature at the bottom of one of those forms, I saw something that stopped my breath. It wasn't my signature, but it was supposed to be. I had never signed that authorization. When David returned, I handed him the folder. Gregory forged this. He frowned. He's retired now, isn't he? Living in Florida, apparently, I said. At least, that's what the foundation's old reports say. But if he handled my estate after the crash, he had full access to every account, every holding. If Claire and Ronan needed clearance, they didn't get it from thin air. They got it from him. David exhaled. You think he's the one who wrote that letter? I think he's warning me to stop digging. And you won't? I smiled faintly. You know me too well. 2 weeks later, we flew to Florida. The sun there was merciless, bright enough to bleach even guilt into something pretty. Gregory's house sat near the coast, a wide, white bungalow with hedges cut too neatly in silence that stretched like a wound. He was surprised to see me at his door. For a long moment, he just stared, eyes winer. My God, you're alive, I said coolly, and very curious. We sat in his garden. He poured iced tea like nothing had happened, hands only slightly trembling. I can't believe this. They said you were gone. We all mourned you. Did you? I asked. Or did you profit from it? His hand froze halfway to his glass. What are you implying? You forged my signature, I said. You signed over documents you had no authority to touch. And you authorized transfers to accounts under Claire's direction. He paled. You don't understand. She said it was all part of the estate restructuring. That you had planned it. I didn't, I said. But you knew that. Gregory's eyes darted toward the ocean. You don't know what she threatened me with. Ronan had files, photos, recordings. They would have destroyed me. You destroyed yourself the moment you chose convenience over conscience, I said. You helped them steal my life. He leaned back exhausted. You think exposing me will bring you peace? It won't. There are others. Bigger than me, bigger than Claire. People Thomas worked with before his death. People who didn't want you inheriting anything because you refused to play their game. What game? I asked. The game of legacy, he whispered. Of old money protecting old sins. He reached into a folder beside him and handed me an envelope. Inside were photocopies of offshore accounts. Names I didn't recognize. Shell corporations linked to the Whitmore Foundation, all predating my supposed death. Thomas's signature was on one of them. My throat tightened. Are you telling me my husband? Gregory shook his head. Not exactly, he was pressured. They made him shift funds to hide tax liabilities. He told me he'd fix it one day. Then he died. And when you came close to discovering it, they made sure you disappeared long enough for others to clean the mess. The words hit like cold water. I remembered the mechanical failure that caused the crash. How odd it had been that the investigation wrapped up so quickly. Are you saying my crash wasn't an accident? He looked away. I'm saying it was convenient. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The ocean roared beyond the walls, indifferent to everything. Finally, I stood. You'll testify, I said. You'll give me every name. He nodded slowly, defeated. If it saves me from whatever's still coming. Yes. When we left, David glanced back at the house. You believe him? I believe the fear, I said. And fear doesn't lie. Back in New York, the dominoes started to fall again. Gregory's testimony reopened the investigation into the Whitmore Foundation's financial history. The FBI got involved this time. What began as a family scandal was now a federal probe into corporate corruption spanning decades, and through it all, I stayed steady. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe acceptance, but I no longer felt rage, only resolve. The truth was larger than my grief now. It was legacy work, cleansing the name Thomas left behind. Michael returned one evening, eyes tired but clearer. "I heard about Gregory," he said. "So it wasn't just Claire." "No," I said. "It never is. Corruption's like mold. It hides until you tear the walls down." He nodded slowly. "If you need me to testify, or I'll let you know," I said. "For now, rebuild yourself. That's the only apology that matters." He smiled faintly. "I'm trying. Anna's been helping." That made me pause. "Anna," he nodded. "She's forgiving me. I don't deserve it, but she's doing it anyway." For the first time in a long while, I felt something like peace. Months passed. Trials concluded. Gregory testified, implicating half a dozen silent partners who had profited from Thomas's old investments. The crash that almost killed me was reclassified, not an accident, but the result of maintenance interference. The culprits were long gone, hiding behind laws and borders, but their power had cracks now. The truth had done its work. The day the final report came out, I stood on the balcony of the rebuilt foundation headquarters. The city below looked cleaner somehow, washed in sunlight. Anna joined me, smiling softly. "It's really over, isn't it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "At least this chapter." "What now?" "No," I said. "We use what's left for something good. The foundation will go back to its roots, helping those who have no one to fight for them. People like I was once." She looked at me proud. "You really came back from the dead." I smiled faintly. "No, I just finally started living." As we watched the city move, I thought of everything lost and gained. Love betrayed, truth recovered, legacy rebuilt. The world would remember the scandal, but I would remember the quiet victories: Michael's apology, Anna's forgiveness, my own peace. Somewhere, in another city, Claire was serving her sentence. Gregory was in witness protection. The world had moved on, but my name no longer carried shame. It carried survival. Before leaving the balcony, I whispered to the wind, "Thomas, we're clean now." And maybe it was imagination, or maybe grace, but for the first time since that terrible day years ago, I felt something warm brush my shoulder. Like a quiet thank you. The storm had ended. The woman the world thought was dead had done what even the living rarely manage. She had faced the truth and survived it. And that, I realized, was worth far more than $25 million. It was worth my soul.